Thanks so much to all my patrons. Join now to help support the channel and help pick the books that I review. Link in the description. And I am done. Okay, so I just got done reading The Trials of Empire. This is the final book in the Empire of the Wolf trilogy by Richard Swan, and I want to give you my unedited thoughts on finishing this book, which was literally just right now. So, yeah, sadly, I'm gonna have to give this one a 3 stars. I had a lot of problems with this book. I liked the vibe of it. I like the characters still. But there were some major problems with the plot here that did not exist in the first two. The first two that I thoroughly loved. And yeah, this is, I typically have a bias in a positive way where I typically love endings to books. And I think a lot of people are like that, especially in fantasy. In part because a lot of fantasy series aren't done. So when you finally get it, and an author can just kind of tie everything together, it's just a wonderful feeling. And it feels like it improves on the previous ones because it finally just, not only is it a good book, but it finally wraps things up. You get that conclusion and those surprises that you've just been waiting for. And yeah, I even love endings to books that aren't typically loved. I mean, even something like Lightbringer, the series by, I forget who, I should remember that, but the not the Lightbringer by Pierce Brown, but the Lightbringer series, and the 5th book everyone hates. I think it's the 5th and final book, and I didn't mind it. I thought it was okay. And not only that, my expectations for this final book were over the moon. I love the first 2 books. I gave them both 5 out of 5s. The second one in the series was one of my favorite books that I read last year. And, so to go into this final book and have to give it a 3 out of 5, it's such a painful experience for me, far more than if I just read a random book and had to give it 3 out of 5. That would be like, whatever. But this is just, it's so hard for me to deal with this. And what I feel like has really diminished my thoughts on the series as a whole, and just kind of ruined my expectations here. So, the first one in this series, it was more of like a mystery novel and with these horror elements to it, which are 2 things that I normally would never like, but somehow they just worked so well together. In 2 genres that I genuinely don't like. It just worked to perfection. The second one I even liked more, and it was more this like medieval epic fantasy with these horror elements in it. The mystery's kind of gone. There's some mystery elements here, but the mystery's out there now. We get it. The plot's hitting the ground, and it was just really fun, and I couldn't think higher of that book. The second one was just such a nice change of pace. It expanded things at a pretty quick pace, but it was like perfectly quick, and it didn't try to take too much on. Now, unfortunately, in this one, it tried to speed things up at such a blistering pace that it ruined what it was trying to go for, at least in my opinion. And it abandoned that promise that I feel like the first 2 books made to the reader. Now, without spoiling anything, because these are all spoiler-free, there is this conspiracy, generally speaking, that's trying to take over the Empire. And that's what this whole series is really about. But now it's turned into, like, ancient, powerful, like, eldritch demon beings that are, like, incomprehensibly powerful taking over. This change is not an impossible one to pull off. It slowly was morphing into that one in the second book, but all it is now is that central point to the books now in this final one. And again, this could have been pulled off, I feel like, at least in a way that I would have liked. I'm sure a lot of people are going to watch this and be like, what do you mean, man? It was pulled off. Good for you. I'm glad you loved it. But my problem is that it didn't devote enough time into trying to pull off these rapidly different concepts. Within a relatively short amount of pages here that the author had to work with, it was just too much. And way too much, actually. This should have been a 4, maybe 5 book series, if this is where the author wanted to take things. Not a trilogy where, there's more ramp up to action in the final book than the first 2 combined, like, times 5 or times 10. No longer, am I getting that character focus with, like, extremely compelling internal conflict. There was a little bit of that. We get some, memorable moments where the main character here has those moments, but it's nothing compared to the first two. It's replaced with this focus on a brand new aspect of the story where we're all of the sudden throwing out this antagonist from the first two books that's been built up to this huge level, an antagonist that I thoroughly hated. And now it's not really about that antagonist anymore, and it's just a total 180. We get this brand new, not this brand new, we get multiple brand new groups of people that are only brought up in this book and playing a major role here, which I always hate. In a series, I want things to build up. I want the groundwork being laid, and then finally we're going to see it. But it was like introduced, now they're really important, now their book's going to be about this. We get this new antagonist who was actually the big baddie all along, and we didn't ever know about it as the reader, and having a whole book trying to piece all of this together without the proper setup, felt like it missed the mark. My mind just kind of blurred here because, we got so much new information with the pages and the pages and the pages of info dumps, which I hate. And in a series like this that didn't have info dumps up to this, it felt strange. And when we weren't getting those info dumps, we were getting these weird dream sequences, something that I've always hated in my books. Now, a lot of people love that kind of stuff. I hate dream sequences. I've literally never read them where I like them. And we got this immensely unsatisfying ending due to me not really having the emotional investment in the new direction that things took. I also feel like the very ending of this book was not enjoyable between the two main characters. Now, while the book in the series is about this empire trying to, hold off this takeover, at the end of the day, this is really a relationship, not in the traditional sense, but in a mentor-protege sense between these two main characters. And the resolution that we get between these characters, that in this conflict has been building up, it did not feel satisfying. Now, I don't need satisfying in my books. I don't need to have a happy ending. But I can still find unhappy endings to be satisfying, if that makes sense. And this one just missed on both those marks. Again, I don't need a fairy tale ending, but I do need some attention given to it instead of it just being kind of like thrown into the final chapter of the book. That doesn't work for me. And none of this is even mentioning the fact that the first half of this book was a slog to get through, just trying to bring the factions politically into the conflict. And in the second half is where we get all the crazy stuff. So this really felt like a tale of two books. The first half of this, I don't understand how anybody could like it. Literally anybody. Now, there's going to be a lot of people here because not everything works for everybody and not everything doesn't work for everybody. So there's going to be some people that are like, that was awesome. I don't understand that perspective. Now, I do get what people found to like out of the second half. I didn't like it, but at least I get it. We got the action, everything's set up. Boom, let's go to the races. Let's complete this thing. But the first one, just like... not only did we get a slog, but it was about like groups of people that we are first meeting. It's way too late in the series to be first introducing new groups when the book is ending in this book. And these aren't like crazy long books. So like not only does the craziness not have enough pages in the book to develop, it's all crammed into like 250 or so pages, which is even worse. Just the flow of this didn't work. And while this all does come off like I hated the book and the series itself, ultimately, it wasn't a horrible book. I'm giving it 3 stars. It was okay. I didn't like it, did not dislike it. It was just kind of felt ambivalent about it. I just, like, to leave a book to have this, like, okay feeling about it just really, really sucks when I had this optimism through the roof for this thing. I mean, this book... When I went back and did my list of the books that I'm most anticipated about reading that are coming out in 2024, it was my 4th most optimistic. And the ones ahead of it are like top of the top tier. And I thought this was going to be there as well. And so I was giddy with excitement going into this. So to read a book that was a bore in one half and then a bit of a mess in the second half was a letdown, to say the least. Now, having said that, I do still love these characters. I love the overall story here. I will still recommend this series to people. And quite frankly, as is almost always true with the books that I don't love, there's going to be a ton of people, if not most people, in fact, probably most people, that are thinking I'm nuts because they think this is the best one of the trilogy, and it's perfect, and everything's great, and Matt, what are you talking about? So don't let my thoughts on this turn you away from this book or this series. This is one guy's opinion, nothing more. But that doesn't change the fact that I'm disappointed. You know, if you have not read this final book, and there's a good chance you haven't, not only because, you know, this series isn't the most popular, you know, it's got a decent amount of following in the modern fantasy world. You know, this is a somewhat popular, newer series. I feel like it's only been being written for the last few years. The author came out with a book every 1 or 2 years or so. You know, and it had a lot of like fanfare going for it. And, you know, I just, in this final book, it just came out. So if you've read the first 2 and you're like, man, Matt hates it, I don't know if I'm going to read it. Don't do that. Read it. And try not to, you know, think about the stuff that I've said if that's possible. Ideally, don't watch my videos if you're about to read a book, because go in with no preconceived notions. It's such a better way to go about things. In most cases, sometimes it's good to kind of know to prepare, but I think you just go in and maybe you'll love it. And if you haven't read this series yet and you're like, yeah, you know, I need a series that has a good ending, it does have a big ending and you might love it. You know, and I still, to this day, am going to recommend the first book to a lot of people. And if you like it, keep going. And if you like the second one, keep going. And hopefully you like the third one. Just didn't work for me. So I don't really have much more to say about this. Disappointed, to say the least. But, you know, it's okay. So thank you so much for watching. And as always, happy reading to you. Thanks again to all my patrons, with a special shout out to my Ascendant tier and Librarian tier patrons: Anna G, CJ, Doust, Darren, Gregory, JD, Jonathan, Nathan T, Nev's Book Channel, 𝗓𝗏𝗏, Ron Reich, Russell, Ryan L, Sydney Baker, Tay C, Tahir, Anna, Andra, Blair, Brock, Evan, Harry B, Joe UK, Kat Mick, Michael Sugarman, Philippe, Sky, Wacky, and Zion. Thanks for sticking to the end of this video, and if you want to watch some more content from my channel, click over here and I've got some good videos for you. Thanks so much.